Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Exodus class. We are in Exodus class number 15 today, and we're going to be studying the 14th chapter of Exodus, which is the chapter of crossing the Red Sea. So I won't spoil the suspense for you and tell you if they get to the other side or not. We'll find out as we go through. You also have, in addition to, by the way, if you're watching online, first of all, welcome. We're delighted to have you with us today. And you can download the same notes that everyone here in the class has on your screen. Just click on the link and you'll be able to look at the notes, and if you want to download them and print them, you can do that. So welcome all of you that are joining us. We pray the Lord is blessing you. Those of you that are here in class also have this map, and I'll get into that. You saw this last week. It's the same map. I'm going to show it to you again this week. You'll see it one more time in the class as we get a little bit further into the time of it. So where we left off 2 weeks ago, we didn't have class last week. Where we left off 2 weeks ago, the Israelites had exited from Egypt. They had come out of the country. So they had come out of Goshen. They had come out of the country. We talked about the various routes, the 7 different routes that they might have come out on. We talked about how the 4 northern routes probably didn't make any sense because it was the dry season, and they were just crossing very small bodies of water that weren't very deep. So it's very unlikely that this is the major crossing of the Red Sea that the Bible talks about. So chances are these 4 routes, and many people, you'll find books out there talking about these 4 routes. Those are probably not the routes that they came out on. Chances are they came out on what I had last week as routes 5, 6, or 7. One of them goes across the Bay of Suez here. The second one goes across the Gulf of Aqaba down here at the Straits of Tiran. And the third one goes across the middle of the Gulf of Aqaba at Nuweiba Beach. So those are probably the 3 of them. We'll talk more about that as we get into it today. So one of the things we saw at the very end of last week's class is once they left here and began this trip down to whichever of these routes they took, God put a cloud in front of them by day and a fire in front of them by night to guide them. So they didn't have GPS, they didn't have compasses, they didn't have anything. They didn't go where they thought they wanted to go. They would have thought, let's just take a straight route and go around here and go straight to Canaan. We can be there in a couple of weeks. If we do that, it's going to be great. We'll be right back home. Problem is the Canaanite people were ready to make war on them if they did that, and there were way more of them, and they were armed and had armies and everything else. And God probably could have beaten those armies if he wanted to, but he had another idea in mind. He wanted to teach them a whole lot about him in the meantime while they got ready to cross into the promised land. So God had a different place, and he led them with that cloud, and he led them on the trip. Probably one of these 3, either this one here, or this one, or this one. Probably one of those 3 routes he led them on. And it says that one of the things we studied last week is it said that they could travel both day and night. So the fire at night allowed them to travel and see the flames. That implies that they were traveling a lot during the day, right? They didn't just travel 3 hours in the afternoon or something. They were apparently traveling a lot during the day. So they might have covered very long distances. And some of these, and bear in mind, you got a couple of million people, and they're pushing along goats and chickens and cattle and whatever else they're bringing, donkeys, I don't know, whatever else they're bringing with them. So it's a very slow-moving caravan, but God might have allowed them, because they could go through the night, to just keep on going. So maybe he supernaturally pumped them up so that they could do this for however many days it is. The scriptures aren't absolutely clear on exactly how many days we're talking about. There are some people that have guessed at it, but I'm not going to do that with you here. So first of all, they camped at a place called Etham. And Etham, they say, is at the edge of the desert. We saw that last week. We have no idea where Etham is. No archaeologist has ever found it. There are people that think it's likely up in here, right at the boundary of Egypt, if you will. There are people who think it's down in here or over in here. There are people who think it's out here. We don't know. Oh, I'm sorry, that think it's out here. We don't really know where Etham is, but they camped at Etham at the edge of the desert, it tells us. And then they crossed out of Egypt. So they came out of Egypt. So they crossed this boundary here. This is the boundary of Egypt at Sukkoth. And from there, they were presumably moving east. We assume they were moving east because Canaan is east, and they're heading toward Canaan. So we assume they're moving east, but let's take a look at verse 1. I'm going to read you now verse 1 and 2. Let's take a look at what verse 1 and 2 say. That's not exactly what verse 1 and 2 say. This is Exodus 14, verses 1 and 2. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back." Tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near Pi Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. They are to encamp by the sea directly opposite Baal Zephon. Okay, so there are 3 cities mentioned in there. Pi Hahiroth, we've already talked about Sukkoth, and we've already talked about Etham, and we don't have archaeological evidence for either of those. Now we have 3 more names. We have Pi Hahiroth, we have Migdol, and we have Baal Zephon. And there's no archaeological evidence for any of those as well. Now bear in mind, this was a nomadic group that we're moving through. So we're not exactly sure where any of these 5 are. So that's part of the problem we have here. I gave you the map here that gives you one person's thoughts on it. Actually gives you one person's thoughts on all 3 of the different routes. If you look at this map, you'll see 3 things here. One of them, you'll see at the top of the Bay of Suez, at the top of the Gulf of Suez is a little area called the Bay of Suez. It's right in here on your map. And there's a little white arrow. That's possible that that was the crossing. It's possible that that was it. And that would make sense if they turned back. So if they were already here at the boundary and they turned back and the flame led them this way, then they could have come through here and crossed at the Bay of Suez. That might be what turn back means. Many people think that's it. I'll tell you that if you were to ask the experts, you're not going to find a 50% majority for any of these routes. You'll find they're all over the map. But probably the largest group of experts you'll find say they thought that the crossing was here at the Bay of Suez. You might ask, well, wait a minute. Why wouldn't Pharaoh just take his chariots around and meet him on the other side, which is pretty easy? This is not long. It's only 12 miles across here. Why doesn't he just go 20 miles around with his chariots? With chariots, you could do 20 miles in an hour, right? Why doesn't he just go around and catch him on the other side? Well, the answer is there are mountains here, and he's not going to get through those mountains very easily. So God kind of, maybe, if this is the route, God put them in the right place, right? So there's a possibility that's one of the routes. The second route would have gone down this way to the bottom of the peninsula. And this is the Sinai Peninsula here, by the way. I didn't write that on. This is the Sinai Peninsula. By the way, an interesting point for you. It wasn't called the Sinai Peninsula back then. There was a British guy who came along in the 1820s and named it the Sinai Peninsula because he thought this is where Mount Sinai had to be. It's probably not really where Mount Sinai is, but up until then it had some Arabic name that is gone from history now. But the interesting story is in 1799, Napoleon was defeated here by the British in Egypt. And when the British defeated Napoleon, they took the Sinai Peninsula, because they took Egypt, then they took the Sinai Peninsula. And at that point, the British ruled Sinai for 150 years. So during that period, they got to rename a whole bunch of stuff. And they renamed this peninsula the Sinai Peninsula. So this is relatively recent. It's only about 200 years ago that it was named the Sinai Peninsula. There is a place down here called Mount Sinai on the map. It's right down here. It's possible that that's the real Mount Sinai. It's unlikely, but it's possible that that might be the real Mount Sinai. At least that British guy thought so 200 years ago. Just to give you some thoughts on this. As I say, the other route would lead you over to here. As you come around, you cross here at what's called the Straits of Tiran. And there is an underwater ridge there that's quite a bit below the surface. It's 700 feet below the surface. So this is very deep in here, by the way. This is a rift valley, very deep. But there is an underwater ridge about 700 feet below the surface. Talk about a major miracle, moving 700 feet of water out of the way and piling it up alongside might be a major miracle. This might be a really good place. This particular gentleman believes that is the route, if you look at the map that I presented for you here. The third one, and there are a lot of people for, says that they wound through the Sinai Peninsula. This was all mountains in here, very windy path winding through, and eventually you come to a place called Nueva Beach, and it is big enough that you could camp 2 or 3 million people on it. And there's also another underwater ridge across here that goes across. So that's another possibility of where they might have crossed. So those are the three.
Huh? How deep is that
That
bridge?
is actually deeper. That's about 900 feet there to get across. That one, by the way, has relatively gentle ridges at the end. So it's relatively, how do I want to say this? On this one here, it kind of goes down and then across and then up. On this one here, it's not as deep, but it goes down faster, goes across, and goes up faster on this one here. But God might have changed the topography. I mean, God can do whatever he wants to. I mean, if God can stack up water hundreds of feet high, he can change the ground underneath and make it easy to walk across. It says they walked across on dry land. I haven't gotten to any of that yet, but we're going to go through that today as we talk about it. So that's kind of where we are. Let's get. So it's possible they may have turned back. The Bible says they turned back. We know they got to the boundary of Egypt. Does turn back mean they turned back this way and went across here? That's what most experts think. Not most, but a plurality. Or does turn back mean they didn't go on this route, but they turned away from that route and went down here into Sinai? Could mean either one. We don't know what those words turn back mean in the Bible. Someday God will show us. Okay. That's the end of verse 2. Questions on that or more questions on that? Let's move on to verse 3 and 4. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. So Pharaoh is looking at this. They're being led by a cloud and a fire, right? They're just going wherever the cloud and the fire go. It's all over the place. Who knows where they're going? They don't know where they're going. God said, follow this, and they're doing it, right? So Pharaoh's looking at this, and he's obviously sent some spies behind them. He's looking at this and thinking, they don't know what they're doing. Maybe there's a chance to if I use my head, I can get them back here. Let's think about that, right? That's what Pharaoh's thinking here. So let's continue on. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. So God is going to take care of this, right? God is going to once again, for the umpteenth time, harden Pharaoh's heart until Pharaoh says, yeah, I'm going to go get these people and bring them back. So why would he want to do that? Well, bear in mind, a couple of weeks ago, when they left, Pharaoh had just lost his son. They had had 10 plagues. The country was destroyed. Pharaoh finally said, okay, I have all this free labor. I will give this labor up. I will let you guys go. So the Egyptians have had a couple of weeks to think about it, and they're thinking, wait a minute, if I let all this labor go, we're going to have to do it ourselves, right? We're going to have to build these pyramids and these cities and whatever. Do I really want to let this labor go? Why don't I go? If these people are just wandering around aimlessly in the desert following some cloud, maybe I'll go and bring them back. That's what he's thinking, right? So, let's continue on. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his armies, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites did this. So God is saying, Pharaoh, you're not getting the glory out of this deal. The whole reason I'm doing this is so that God can get the glory. God is going to get the glory here. By the way, God getting the glory is what a whole lot of history is about, right? When stuff doesn't make sense, chances are it's because God's getting the glory out of it. There's a good chance that that's the reason for it. So God is saying, I want the glory. I'm going to get the glory, and that's why I'm going to do this. So we don't know exactly what that means yet. We're going to find out in a few verses what that means. But God's going to somehow get a lot of glory out of leading the Jews around down here so that Pharaoh ends up making a huge mistake. That's where we're going. Questions on that? Okay, verse 5. Let me read you verse 5. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, what have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services. So guys, now we're going to have to do all this work ourselves. We used to have these slaves to do this stuff for us. We're going to have to do it ourselves. Why don't we go see if we can get them back? Maybe there's a way to get them back, right? Okay, verse 6 through 9, I'm going to read you next. So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. So he's going to get serious about going after them, right? He took 600 of the best chariots, along with the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi Hahiroth, opposite Baal Zephon. So, the Egyptians are marching across the desert someplace here. They're either marching here, or they're marching here, or they're marching here. One of those three places. Pharaoh, who's probably back up in here, there's an old city up in here that he was probably using as a summer palace, gets his chariots together and comes after them. He decides he's going to come after them. What does he want to do? He wants to bring them back. That's what he wants to do. So he's going to come after them. Let's look at that a bit. So he takes the best part of his army, 600 of his best chariots, and then it goes on to say, along with all the other chariots of Egypt. So he takes everything, right? All the chariots he has, presumably some troops, although the troops can't move as fast as the chariots. So maybe they're coming slower. We don't know that. Maybe he comes out with the chariots, and there's a whole army moving behind it. The Bible doesn't tell us that, but that would make sense that he might be doing that. But the Bible doesn't actually tell us that. There's officers. The Lord hardened his heart. We heard that just a couple verses ago. He pursued the Israelites. The Israelites were marching out boldly. Why were they marching out boldly? Because God was leading them. They were going where God was telling them to go. So they were marching out boldly. They're wandering around in the desert. Now Pharaoh's pursuing them. They don't know this yet, though, because they haven't seen Pharaoh's chariots yet. So let's see what happens. The Egyptians, all of Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi Hahiroth, opposite Baal Zephon. So, is Pi Hahiroth... Is Pi Hahiroth here? And Baal Zephon here? Is Pi Hahiroth here and Baal Zephon here? Or is Pi Hahiroth here and Baal Zephon here? We don't know. It's probably one of those three. Could be any one of those three. Lots and lots of confusion among the experts on where those are. So the Israelites are either camped here or here or here. They're by the sea. There's no way out. By the way, this is hemmed in by mountains. This is hemmed in by mountains. This is hemmed in by mountains. So there's no way for them to get out other than the sea, the mountains, or the one passage in which Pharaoh's blocking right now. And all three of these have one passage in which Pharaoh could block. If you look at these on a map geographically, each of these three areas has one twisty passage in through the mountains. Pharaoh could block that. So the people are in a mess, right? They're in a fix. So where are these places? This gentleman on the map shows us one possibility. He thinks that Pi Hahiroth is right down here at the Straits of Tiran. That's where he thinks it is. Another possibility is Nuweiba Beach, which is up here, and he thinks that he's putting that on there because he knows that's another major possibility. And the third one is up here at the Bay of Suez. So Pi Hahiroth could be in any one of those three situations. Okay? So let's move on. If there's no questions on that, we'll move on to, I did want to get into one thing. So, where is Mount Sinai? The British said they thought it was here in about 200 years ago. Interestingly enough, in 1967, when Israel took over this area of the Sinai after the 1967 war, they sent massive archaeological expeditions in right here. And they said, go uncover enough about Mount Sinai for us to know if this is truly a Jewish holy site. They had it from 1967 until 1983. That's 16 years they had it. A lot of archaeological stuff was done right here. They found nothing whatsoever to indicate that that was the real Mount Sinai. If you look at a map, it says this is Mount Sinai on the map. That's because the British guy called it Mount Sinai 200 years ago. Good chance that's not really Mount Sinai. So where is Mount Sinai? The answer might be back in Exodus 3:1 and 3:12. Let me go find those for you again. Let's go back and look at that. We know that Mount Sinai is in Midian. And we know that from Exodus 3:1 and Exodus 3:12. Sort of. We don't exactly know that, but we sort of know that. So 3:1. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Sure sounds like Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, also called Mount Sinai, and other parts of these are called the same. These are the same mountain. Sounds like Mount Horeb is in Midian. Now we know from other places, a lot of archaeology tells us that in those days, Midian was in here. This was in Midian. By the way, it's in modern-day Saudi Arabia. So we know this was Midian. There's tons of archaeological evidence for that. We know that was in Midian. So there's a good chance that Mount Horeb is right over here, not over here. I'm going to talk about, in a future class, the mountain itself that many people think is it. And right now it has an Arab name to it. It's not called Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai today on your map. If you're looking for it, you won't find it unless you know the Arab name for it. Let's look at 3:12. I said that's another verse. And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain, on Mount Horeb. So, we know Moses' ultimate destination is here at Mount Horeb. We know it's in Midian. So there's a good chance that it isn't here. There's a good chance it's here, which means they somehow have to get across the Gulf of Aqaba. That might be the crossing point. That might be the crossing. Many experts think it's likely that that's the crossing. Questions on that? Okay, let's move on. Verse 10. 10, 11, and 12 is where I'm going next. Verse 10, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. So the Jews look, and all of a sudden there's this one mountain pass, the only way to get in and out of where they are by the sea, and it's blocked by the Egyptians, right? The Egyptians are there with their chariots. They're terrified, right? The Egyptians have an army, they have weapons, they have horses, they have generals who know what they're doing. The Israelites were slaves. They don't know anything about how to fight an army. What are they going to do, right? They're terrified. Okay, verse 11. I love this part. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? It's almost like they didn't want to come out of Egypt to begin with, right? Yeah, we told you all along we never wanted to leave Egypt, right? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone? Let us serve the Egyptians. Did they really say leave us in slavery serving the Egyptians? I would have been better off to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. So the Jews, for the first time, Moses, welcome to leadership of God's people, right? God's people can be difficult to lead in tough times. God's people can go all over the map on you when you're trying to lead them. Pastors know that, right? God's people can flip on you and do all kinds of things. Welcome to leadership, Moses. So Moses is trying to deal with this mess of Pharaoh on one side and his own people rebelling within him. Moses, now, so I'm going to take you now to one of the best passages in the Bible, verses 13 and 14. Moses comes up with the perfect answer, right? The perfect answer. Moses answers the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still." So as we're talking to people who are all nervous about their faith in the Lord, let's look at the 6 things Moses just said. Number 1, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. When the world is coming at you and people are trying to shake your faith, do not be afraid. Stand firm is the second thing. The third thing is you will see the deliverance of the Lord. God will bring you through it. Just be still. Watch him do it. Fourth, you will never see the Egyptians again. The enemy's going to be gone when this is all over. God's going to take care of the enemy for you. 5, who's going to do it? Are you going to have to get out there with spears and fight these guys? No. The Lord will fight for you. The Lord will lead you through this. 6, you need only to be still. Just keep your cool, be quiet, let the Lord do this. What great advice for any time you're running into any questioning your faith, or people questioning your leadership. Here you go. Do not be afraid. Stand firm. You will see the Lord deliver you. You will never see your enemy again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. I love that passage. That is so cool that Moses came up with this. So Moses is starting to learn how to deal with these people, right? He's dealing with some tough people, and he's starting to learn how to deal with them. Isn't that cool? Okay. Verses 15 to 18. So what's Moses going to do? What is he going to do? We all know the answer, but what's he going to do? Then the Lord said, so Moses at this point, he's a leader, right? He's just shown he's a leader. What's he going to do? We don't know exactly, but presumably he goes to the Lord and says, Lord, what do I do? How do I get out of this mess, right? We don't know that, but that's something like that presumably happens. Then we hear God's answer. So we don't know what Moses said to God, but we hear God's answer. The Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Hey, buddy, you got this, right? Tell the Israelites to move on. Just get moving. Well, where are you going to move? You can't move back into the Egyptians. They're blocking the pass. You can't move up into the mountains. You're not going to get 2 million people and all these goats up through the mountains. What's left is the sea. Where are you going to move? Where are you going to move to? Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. So remember, when God gave him the staff, he said, I'm going to give you all the tools you need. Each of us need to realize that. Sometimes we think we're pretty unprepared for service to the Lord, but God has given us all the tools we need. We just don't know it. God has given us all the tools we need for whatever we're doing. God had already given Moses this staff a year ago, back in the desert. Moses used it to kill some snakes and turn the water red in the Red Sea, or in the Nile River. He probably forgot about this staff, but he's got this staff. God says, use your staff. Raise your right hand, use your staff. Let's read that again. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea. Stretch it out over the sea to divide the water. What's that going to do? Huh? Why would I divide the water? So that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. So there's going to be a path. God's going to make a path through the sea. And the Israelites not only are going to be able to walk through the sea through all the mud. No, it's not even going to be mud. It's going to be dry ground under there. God's going to make the ground dry. If you have to come through with mud, your sheep are going to get caught in it, and your cartwheels are going to get stuck, and it's going to be a mess getting everybody across. No, God's going to take care of everything. He's got it all. God is going to take care of it all. Just Be a leader, Moses. Take your staff. Take the gifts I've already given you, and you use them. That's what he's telling me. Let me continue on here. I will harden the heart of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. Wait a minute. Aren't you just going to keep the Egyptians back at the pass here? The Egyptians are going to come in after us? So you're going to create this great path for us, God? We're going to walk across the sea and the Egyptians are going to come right in after us? Huh? And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through the chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. God says that twice, right? So why is God doing this? Why is God doing this whole thing? Why did he lead them around in the desert aimlessly? Why is he about to do this major miracle in the Red Sea? For his glory. He wants people to see the glory of God. Who does he want to see the glory of God? He wants the Egyptians to see it. They're the biggest power on earth. He wants the rest of the world to see it, right? If the army of Egypt can be destroyed by God, this is a serious God. And he wants the Jews to see it. He wants them to see it also. He wants them to know who their God really is. He wants everybody to know that all these other gods they're worshiping are worthless. There's only one God, and this is the God that you should be worshiping. Cool stuff here, right? So the Israelites are going to go into the sea, and now Moses realized he's been fully equipped by God to do God's work. And it's important for us to know that in our ministries as well. Whatever our particular ministry is, sometimes you say, Lord, you expect me to do what? He's given us what we need. We just need to find it. And that we do through prayer. Speaking of 21 days of prayer, we need to find that through prayer. So, what's going to happen next? Verse 19. Then the angel of God, and interestingly enough, and I researched this one a lot this week, it doesn't say the angel of the Lord, and it doesn't say the angel, it says the angel of God. I can only find a few places in all of Scripture where that term is ever used. And I'm not exactly sure who that is. The angel of the Lord is Jesus. We know that. It's a pre-incarnate Jesus. And an angel is just an angel. This says the angel of God. Is it God himself, or is it an angel from God? Not clear. I looked it up in all my Jewish translations too, and they have the same wording in there, the angel of God. So it all says the angel of God. Don't ask me exactly who this is. I don't really know. Is it the Lord himself who's in this cloud, or who's watching above this cloud? Or is it an angel that's in there doing it for him? Don't know. Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, so the angel that's doing the cloud and the flame, withdrew and went behind them. So here they are at the beach, right? The cloud was in front of them. Now the cloud moves around behind them to block who's behind them, the Egyptians. So the Egyptians are now blocked. They're in the pass, and they're blocked. They can't get through. The cloud makes it presumably completely dark in there. Or the fire blocks them, because whether it's day or night, we're going to see it's kind of going towards sunset here. We're not sure exactly the time here. But if it's day, the cloud is blocking them and they can't see anything. It could conceivably be a cloud that's absolutely black, being God. Or it could be a fire. Maybe a fire is blocking them. So the cloud moves around and blocks the Egyptians. So now the Egyptians are set. They have to stay here for a while and wait for God to do his thing. So let's continue on. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them. So pillars in front, or isn't behind them now, which is the sea. Which is between them and the armies. Coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other. So neither went near the other all night long. So picture that. You've got the Jews on one side on the beach here, ready to go over. The Egyptians in the pass trying to get to them. The Egyptians are being blocked by this dark cloud. It's dark on one side, it's light on the other. Maybe that's the fire. I don't know. It's not exactly clear from the wording. To me, that makes sense, that maybe it looked like cloud to the Egyptians and fire to the Israelites so they could see. So now they can actually see, as they begin their passage across the sea, they'll be able to see. It'll be almost like daylight for them to be able to make their passage. Questions on that? Okay, verse 21. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. And there's a whole lot in there. Let's spend a couple minutes on that. So first, so Moses, remember Moses stretched his staff out over the sea to get it to divide. Now he stretches it out over the sea, and God dries the sea. God dries the floor of the sea. That means all these animals and all these carts and all these people are going to be able to walk over and not get stuck in the mud at the bottom. They're going to be able to just go right through it like it's a paved highway or something. I don't know. They're going to be able to go right through it. Yeah.
Question here. It says, the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind.
I'm coming to that next. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Because
They're going east.
west to east.
Yeah. That's a
If
big
you
problem.
looked at the east, it would have.
That's a big problem with this one here. They're going west to east. They're going west to east. This one here, I didn't draw it quite right. They're actually going, let me redo this a little bit. The Bay of Suez is interesting. There is a ridge here as well, by the way. This ridge is only about 20 feet below sea level. So there's ridges in all three of these places, which makes all of them possible. There is a ridge here as well. Take that word bay out of there. If you look at the ridge, if you look at the geography of the ridge actually goes like this. It goes from the southwest to the northeast. Another reason many of the experts think the crossing might have been here is because a west wind, which would have been coming from an east wind coming from this direction, would have blown the water back into here, back into this bay, or back out of the bay, even into the tidal areas beyond the bay, and might have opened that up. Now that doesn't explain how they're restraining this water here, okay? Why doesn't the other side just come in? It doesn't explain that. But there are people who will argue that maybe this is the spot because it's blowing. There is, part of this is at least at an angle. It's not straight into the wind. Yes, east wind, great catch, great catch. And that's why, as I said, if you ask 100 experts which of these 7 paths were chosen, probably 30 to 40% would say this one. Probably another 20% this one, probably 10 or 15% this one, and then a few percent up here for these others. So this is probably the one most of the experts will pick because of exactly that point, the question of the east wind. And also the words turn back. So the words turn back, if they had gotten over to here, which is the boundary of Egypt, they would have had to turn back in order to get to here. Right? So that's possible that this is the place, but we don't know.
Hey, Bob, it reminds me back a few years ago or so when they had this hurricane. It actually took the waters and pushed them out to the sea, and there was just boats, and people could just walk on the bottom of the Gulf or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no water; it was gone, and somehow it pushed the water out to the sea or the ocean somehow.
If you look at take the big tidal wave that was in Japan about 15 years ago. Remember the big tidal wave that hit Japan? What happens in a tidal wave is interesting. Out in the ocean, the land does a rapid sink that just goes whoop. It's a fault block that drops. When it drops, the water flows in out in the ocean. As it flows in, it sucks the water off the land. If you look at the pictures just before the tidal wave came in, that happened. The tide went out very fast at the shore, and it went out very fast, and built up this huge thing in the middle. And then as it got done, the tide came back in eventually with the tidal wave. So yeah, it was
just interesting.
God could have done that. He could have done a fault block move underneath here that would have sucked the water down in one place. How you keep it there all night long while you get 2 million people across is a little trickier. Yeah. I'm not giving you, I don't necessarily have a naturalistic explanation for this. This is a miracle, and it's a major miracle, okay? Yeah. If you're looking for a naturalistic explanation, many people think we have to have them. You're not going to find it here, I don't think. There are a lot of people try to find naturalistic explanations for everything in the Bible. That's a dangerous place to go.
Yeah.
There's a point where you just have to say, God figured it out. He figured out how to do it. Other questions? Okay. It says, the waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. So imagine a wall of water. It's either 20 feet high here, or it's 700 feet high here, or it's 900 feet high here. We don't know which. Or if God moved the bottom, which he could have done, it might be some different number that we don't know. Okay? Let's move on to verse 23. The Egyptians pursued them. Dumb, not smart, not smart. So finally God pulls the cloud away, and the Egyptians say, hey, we're going to go. Pharaoh says, go through that sea. I'm going to stay here and watch you, but go through that sea. Notice there's one person that survives this. It's Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Did he survive it?
yeah.
Yeah. Does it say
Yes.
that?
Yeah. We'll see that I think we'll see that as we go through here.
Okay.
So, at any rate, so he sends his troops into the ocean after them. Now, that's one that tends to say this isn't such a great thing. He probably this is only 12 miles across here. If he had sent them all the way around the mountains and across, it probably would have been 50 miles or 60 miles. He would have known the geography. It's certainly this is not far from it's part of his country practically. He would have known the geography. He could have sent his chariots around, and probably in 2, 3, 4 hours they could have been there. Why did he send them into the sea? The answer is God hardened his heart. Right? God hardened his heart and said, I'm going to go this way. This is the way I'm going to go. I'm going to send my chariots this way. It all comes down to God hardened his heart, and he made a dumb decision. How often does God harden our heart? Not God harden. How often do we harden our heart and we make a dumb decision, right? It certainly has happened with me a few times in my life, and I'm sure it has with most of us. Okay, so let's continue on. Then the Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. So the whole 600 of them and everybody else goes into the sea, whether it's here or here or here. They go into the sea following the Jews on the dry land. Is it dry land still? Maybe God makes another miracle here. We're going to find out as we go on. During the last watch of the night, so this is just before dawn, so the Jews have been crossing all night long, right? They've been crossing all night. It's almost dawn. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. We'll see a lot of places in the Bible where God does that, right? Gideon, a lot of places where God just creates confusion in the mind of people, where they start killing each other or whatever. God does that here, right? He throws this well-disciplined army into confusion. He gets them to do dumb stuff, right? What does that mean? Do they turn and kill each other? Do they turn around and go back into the middle of the ocean? What exactly does that mean? We don't know, but they go into confusion. Let's continue. He, that would be God, jammed the wheels of the chariots so that they had difficulty driving. So God made it hard for the chariots to continue. Here you are on whatever, the ancient version of I-69 going across there. And all of a sudden the road's all rocky and bumpy, right? And all of a sudden things get very, very difficult for the people to do their driving through here. So maybe it's almost like maybe God brings the mud back. I don't know. To me, it makes sense that God probably brought the mud back here, and the chariots get all stuck in the mud, and the wheels start to come off, and their wheels are turning in the wrong direction, and the chariots, you can't keep them going straight, and the horses are trying to pull, and one horse is going that way and one that way. It's hard to tell exactly how God did this, but somehow he created confusion in the Egyptian army. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it. So the Egyptians were fleeing into the sea but in confusion. They might have been fleeing. Some of them might have been fleeing toward the shore. Some of them might have been fleeing back toward the middle of the sea. They were in confusion. They were in chaos. They were panicking. And in panicking, you do dumb stuff. Sometimes you run right back into the middle of a problem. And the Lord swept them into the sea. So how did he sweep them into the sea? Did they run into the 700-foot wall of sea? Probably not. The next sentence is going to answer how it happened. How did the Lord sweep them into the sea? The Egyptian, where am I at? He jammed the wheels of their chariots. And the Egyptians said, let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. So all of a sudden they figured out whatever God did, it was enough that they said, oh my gosh, their God is real. Their God is doing this to us. Their God is just messing with us. We're not going to get out of here. Look at all this water. We are in a trap. We're not going to get out of here. It's their God that is messing with our chariots. They're not doing what they're supposed to. Let's go on now to verse 26. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen. Remember this famous scene from the movie, The Ten Commandments, right? Moses goes out again, puts his staff out over the sea, and the Lord brings these giant waves of water back on top of the Egyptians. Now, one of the reasons we're pretty sure it wasn't any of these routes up here is that even this route that has the deepest lake, which is the fourth one down here, even this route here, the lake, even at the worst flooding of the year, only gets up to your chest. So it's hard to believe that was any, and these others had little canals that you cross. So it's unlikely that any of those are really the correct route. Although there are a lot of people that they get into this whole thing about, well, maybe it's not the Red Sea, maybe it's the Reed Sea. And if it's the Reed Sea, then it's a shallow lake. And if it's a shallow lake, then this isn't a major miracle at all. This is just some guys go out and get stuck in the mud and they drown when the tide comes in. There's a lot of that kind of thinking out there of people that think this has to be naturalistic. It can't be a major miracle. You can get your own opinion, but I think it's a major miracle. That's what I think. I don't think God would do this and go through all this rigmarole to do a minor. Let's get them stuck in a bog of reeds, right? I think God is.
There's not going to be a wall of water on each side.
Right. Yeah, a wall 4 feet high on each side. Hey Joe, how you doing over there? Yeah. So.
40 feet high.
Where were we? Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. So just as the sun's rising, the sea comes back in its place. That's not going to be good for the Egyptians. They're in the middle of the sea, right? The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. So the water just picked the Egyptians up and just drowned them, right? The water flowed back and covered the chariots and the horsemen and the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. We're going to find out later that Pharaoh did, but Pharaoh commanded them to go in. But all of the entire army of Egypt died. Every single soldier that was in there died. Imagine, just think about that for a minute. Here you have the most powerful army in the world, the most powerful nation in the world, and all of a sudden every single person in their army gets killed in one battle against the Lord. Wow, that's a pretty vulnerable country now. There are people around there that are saying, oh boy, let's go take over part of Egypt, right? So they're going to be spending some time dealing with the after effects of this after this situation. This is a catastrophe for Egypt. Verse 29 and 30, 31, but the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground. So this is kind of Moses' summary, right? So God provided a path through the sea on dry ground. There was no mud, no nothing when the Israelites went through it. God provided dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. So he just walled the water up, just like you saw in the Ten Commandments movie. He walled the water up on their right and on their left. He didn't do that with a west wind coming or whatever. He did that with that might have been part of it, but he did something more than that to make that happen. That day, the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. So there it is, right? We had the Passover the other day where they got out of slavery. That was the first miracle. That was the first of the miracles. Now you have this next miracle. Actually, that was the 10th of the miracles. Now you have this next miracle, which is even bigger. This miracle is the deliverance. Actually, let me continue on. The Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. So he saved them from slavery, from the Egyptians, from death. This would have been physical death. This is obviously looking forward to what Jesus will do in saving us from spiritual death, when Jesus will save us from spiritual death. This is a foretaste of what's coming. Much of the Old Testament is that way. And Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the beach, so their bodies wash up on the shore, right? And the Jews are sitting there looking, wow, we have a really serious God here. You know, our God is really powerful, and we need to give him some glory, because he's a pretty powerful God. Yeah.
Makes you wonder, though, later on, when they started griping, it's like, why didn't they remember that this, it seemed like it would make a significant impact.
Again, welcome to leading God's people. It's a challenge, and pastors all over the world deal with exactly that. And people who are in a ministry for God deal with this problem all over the place. Any of us that have done any ministry with God know that there's chaos out there all the time. We're constantly dealing with it. That's part of the deal, and a lot of that is Satan. Satan is throwing stuff out there to try to stop us, and our job is to bear in mind these 6 things, right? Do not be afraid, stand firm, you'll be delivered. You're never going to see your enemy again. The Lord is going to do it for you, and just be still. Those are the 6 things that are in that famous verse. I love that verse. Those are the 6 things that are in there. These are your leadership verses for Christian leaders, right? Right there.
Well, the other thing is, here we are sitting as humans trying to figure out how this all happened. How did the waters part? How did they stand on both sides? How did it cover, why do we want to question how God did it? I mean, he's the one that created this whole world, the whole universe, everything. If he wants to just go, and it's there, it's there.
Yep.
And if the Bible says this is what happened and this is how it happened, why are we doubting it and asking questions about it and trying to figure out in our minute, tiny little mind, figuring out how God did something?
And part of the answer for us is clear. We don't need to. But part of the reason we try to do this kind of stuff is because much of the world does not believe in that. And as believers, part of our job is to go out there and work with them and try to convince them. And having archaeological evidence behind us that says this really happened and we can prove it is something that the world will listen to more than they'll listen to what's in here. Even though this is better documented than any archaeology out there, there is the proof that Jesus Christ ever existed is hundreds of times more descriptive than the proof that Julius Caesar ever existed. And yet nobody questions that Julius Caesar ever existed.
But then again, the experience that the person has on their own with encountering God speaks more volume than hearing of somebody else's experience.
Exactly. But we have to get them there. But we don't have to get them there. He has to get them there. We have to help him get them there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just thoughts. The other thought we had was when it said that the Egyptians said that it was God who did this and wanting to flee.
Yeah.
How did that get recorded? Who knew that the Egyptians said that?
Well, God is
telling
dictating
them
this to Moses.
Right.
We'll find out
Okay.
later
It was
that
just
God
words
is
that
dictating
caught me.
all of this to Moses. I
But then the
don't
other
think it's
thing
in the
that's-
book of Exodus. I think it's later on. But
The other thing that was cool about that, though, is that they recognized that it was God.
Yeah.
So is that him also giving them saving grace because they recognized that it was through God's power?
I don't know that it's saving grace. Maybe there's a few of them that said, "Lord, save me. I believe in you.
Right.
Save me from this flood." There might have been some of that
That's
going on. We'll never know. The Bible doesn't inform us of that. So.
Just thoughts.
Yeah, good, great thinking. Thank you. Glad you're here today. Um,
No choir, so you know.
And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. So they're never going to doubt him again, right? I mean, here it is, right here. They're never going to doubt Moses again. I mean, they've been proven. One of the greatest miracles ever in the Bible has just been performed right in front of them. They've seen all the dead bodies. They've seen the dry land. Why would they ever doubt the Lord again? Wait till next week.
Yeah.
Next week, we'll talk about them wandering in the desert looking for water, yeah. So that's all I have, unless there's other questions.
So on the Pharaoh, you kind of went over before which Pharaoh it was. So in history, is there an indication that that Pharaoh in history died later? Because I don't, you're going
Pharaoh
to talk about it
we
later. I
think
don't
it's-
remember him talking about Pharaoh after
We think
this.
we think it's very likely that it's Pharaoh. I think it's very likely that it's Pharaoh Tutmos III. Again, you can find experts that have got pharaohs all over. There are even some pharaohs that think it's Ramesses, which is hundreds of years later. And Cecil B. DeMille thought it was yeah, he thought it was Ramses when he made the movie. I think it's probably Pharaoh Tutmos III. And no, it looks like Pharaoh. We know the exact year of the Passover because it's recorded in the Bible. That's 1446 BC, and we know that Pharaoh Tutmos III reigned on after that. So we know
That's what I
that
was
Pharaoh
wondering,
Tutmos III
historically, yeah.
was in power at that point and reigned on after that point. But we don't know. I mean, we know the year he died, for that matter. It was not at this point. So it's pretty sure that he lived on. Is that your question, or were you asking
Yeah.
something else? Okay.
Yeah, because does the Bible actually talk about the Pharaoh, that Pharaoh later? Because I don't know as it really mentions anything that goes on with the,
Yeah, maybe not.
the
I'm not
Egyptians
sure.
after
Maybe
that.
not.
Other than the Israelites talking about the Egyptians. and
I'll have to
Egypt.
look at that. I'm not sure I can answer that definitively. Well, those of you joining us at home, thank you. We look forward to seeing you next week. We pray the Lord will bless you, and we pray that you are in prayer. We're in prayer here in our church, and we pray that wherever you are, that you are in prayer as well. And